Hey guys, welcome back. It is your favorite Gimp with a Limp, and I'm back with some more videos finally for you. I know it's been a few days since I've been able to get something up. Sorry, I've had some wicked food poisoning that has knocked me down. But back up and running, and I wanted to do a quick overview about Donnerschlag, which was sent to me. The people at Volca Simulations were nice enough to send this to me, along with a couple other games actually that I'm gonna have to check out because their stuff is amazing. Like the quality of the box is just phenomenal. I remember when I opened it up, I was like, oh, this looks so cool. Can't wait to try it out. But this one is about the breakout of the 6th Army, the 6th German Army from Stalingrad as they were trying to reconnect with the main German army. They had been cut off by the Soviets and they wanted to reconnect. Of course, Hitler was a moron and ended up getting them wiped out because he's stupid, but we'll actually touch on the history of that. So let's head down to the table. All right, so we're down here at the table taking a look at Donnerschlag. Obviously, this is just a portion of the map. It's rather large. We're going to take and go over all of it, though, and let you guys see all the pieces of it. Now, just depending on how long this first part takes going over the components and the basics of the game, I might end up splitting this up into two. I kind of hope I don't, but I want to give some examples of gameplay as well. So if the overview takes a little bit too long, I will tack on an additional part 2 that goes over some examples of gameplay. Now, one of the things I did want to take and mention was something they had in the back of the rulebook. And a lot of rulebooks have this, but this went into depth with everything. And I really appreciate when they do this. And this is the historical notes of what the battle is and what's actually going on. So this actually goes into the day by day, the planning out, when it started, all the good stuff, who was involved. It even shows the maps where the units were. That way, when you're playing out the actual game itself and moving these units, you know what happened in real life, what decisions they made. Now, without getting into the long-winded detail, if you do get the game, you'll be able to read this, but obviously you can pull up these historical notes online in many places, so you can find this information if you want to just pull it up for yourself. But this does have to do with the breakout of the 6th Army, the 6th German Army from Stalingrad, where they were encircled by the Soviet forces. So they were pressured in here. Hitler had his idea of, no step back. We've got here. We're going to keep pushing. And Dummy kept thinking that they could push through and break through and just open up so supply could come in and not pull those guys out. Now, plenty of people believe that, and personally, I think they're probably right, that had he started withdrawing the troops way earlier, back when it was, recommended to him, pull out, let's regroup, let's get things settled, not have to fight the whole Soviet winter thing, all that stuff, while they still had strength, while the troops weren't as weakened, when they had more supplies, all of that type stuff, they would have been in a much better position and could have got the breakout. Plus, the Soviets would not have had time to prepare for the German offensive. Finally, he was talked into it. And one of the problems is that the German general here was very big into, I'm going to obey orders. I'm going to do what I'm told, even if it gets me and all my men killed. So he refused to break out until the order was actually given, which it never really ended up getting given. But again, you guys can read the details on this. But multiple attempts were made to push through, to fight through, to break in here, because these guys were supposed to fight a little ways out. They said they could fight up maybe 30 kilometers. So the rest were going to have to fight in all that distance to break this little encirclement here. But the Soviets had so much time because the Germans dithered and they kept thinking about it, and Hitler didn't want to give any inch of ground. It's like, well, it doesn't matter what you want, buddy. If you don't pull your guys back, they're going to all get wiped out and you're going to lose everyone, which is ultimately what ended up happening in real life. They did make an attempt. They did try to push through. These guys never really tried to push out that far, but they did try to push through to get to a meeting point, and they got close. They got something, what did it say, like 50 or so kilometers away. And let's see, yeah, they would have had to have advanced another 20 kilometers. So they were 20 kilometers even further away from being able to break the encirclement. unfortunately, so that did not work for them. I do love it when they have the historical notes like that in the rule book or as an addendum. That way you can read about it. So that's what we're doing here. Down in the bottom right of the map, these are all the German and Romanian forces, I should say. And that's actually something I didn't know, is there is a fair amount of Romanians who were involved. We've got the 6th Panzers right here. And who are these guys again? This is what, the 23rd? Show one of our counters. Yeah, it says 23rd piece. I'm assuming that's 23rd Panzers. It's got the standard NATO symbols, but the symbol up there in the upper right is what unit they're attached to. And while we're looking at the counter, bottom left number is our attack value. Bottom right number is its movement value. And the colors are going to be determining what type of attack it is, whether it's a infantry attack or movement, whether it's motorized or whether it's a tank. Now, in the rule book, this is listed down as white, orange, and red. The pieces themselves are not actually that. They're white, yellow, and orange. I think it just has to do with maybe a translation error between the original language and English. So just understand that yellow means orange and orange means red. Okay, so it's just, one step darker, understanding that. White is obviously white, so you don't have to worry about it. But to show you guys while we're talking about it, oh no, and I'm bumping some of my guys here. It's okay, we can move them back, no big deal. Looking at one of our tank counters here, you can see this is obviously part of the 6 Panzers. It's got 2 steps, and it's got a 2 attack value. Now that being 2 colors there, it represents it can be used as a combination bonus, right? So mechanized and infantry, there's a bonus that can be had during conflict, a column shift. And there, that orangish color, unless I'm just going colorblind and that's red, you guys tell me if I'm wrong, but that's orange to me. That says red in the rulebook, but that's orange. So just understand that yellow is orange and orange is red as far as the rulebook goes. Now, while we're addressing the counters, they did do something kind of neat that I wanted to show you guys as well. You're going to see there's a bunch of extra counters on this counter sheet. Now, some of these are reinforcements that haven't got deployed yet. I left them on the counter sheet so they'd be easy to pull off. But the tanks, you notice they're all still on here as well. And a lot of these are tanks that are deployed already to the board. But if you look, you see that silhouette is different. This is a silhouette versus the standard tank outline that you see on most war games. They actually included 2 versions of it. So it's completely up to you on which version you like. If you like this silhouette version, you can use that. Or if you like what you generally see on a war game, you can use that. It's perfectly up to you. You've got 2 sets. And on a bonus note, if you happen to lose a counter, you've got a spare. So that is a nice little bonus. Me personally, I like the traditional look, the side view of the tank. So that's the ones I've chosen to go with. But if you like this silhouette look, by all means, jump on it, feel froggy. It's up to you on which one you want to use. But looking right here on the right side of the board, we've got our German units. So we've got a couple of German units here. We've got a Romanian unit here, a small Romanian unit here, and a small Romanian unit right up there in the corner, just like 4 guys. And then the rest of this is just huge swatches of Soviet units all the way up the map. So the ultimate goal of these German units is to break out and meet with their reinforcements. All right, so meet to get out, all right, on Operation Donnerschlag. So they have to get to either point A, B, or C. Now, this is the point where the game kind of dithers a little bit as far as solitaire playability, okay, because this is supposed to be a hidden thing. I don't think it's that big of a deal, but it will detract from solitaire play because at a certain point in the game, you are going to take and have to place down one of these meeting zone tokens. And you'll see that they all look the same, but when you flip them over, you see that 2 are dummies and 1 says meeting zone. So that's going to be used to designate A, B, or C as the actual target. that's the one that you're trying to get to. And your opponent is not supposed to know which one you're going to. If you want to play this solitaire, you could roll off on it, come up with some way to do that. For me, I just end up playing the game anyway, both sides against each other, and just see if the Germans can get to one of the meeting zones and call it a day. It's really up to you on how you decide to handle that. But that is a neat inclusion for heads up play. And just to show you guys, these counters, when they're used, they're going to be placed over here. See, meeting zone A, B, and C here on the side of the board. That's where that's going to come into play. And again, that comes into play during a certain point in the game. All right, and to show you guys what I mean by that, when I'm talking about a certain moment of the game, we've got a little counter here, represents Donnerschlag, and the German player, come on, focus for me, there you go. The German player can call the code word Donnerschlag, and that signifies the breakout, okay? But that effectively gives them a time limit. Now, this game runs on a time limit. At most, it's going to be 8 turns. So the German player doesn't have time to dither. You can't pull a Hitler and just sit on your butt and wait for the most opportune moment, which it's not going to happen. Your best bet is to try to slam in there as quick as you can. Anyway, but you're going to pick some point along this turn track to call it, right? So you'll call that code word, and that's when this counter comes into play, and it'll start ticking down. And depending on a couple of conditions, you'll have either 4 or 5. You have to call it very specifically and have very specific conditions hit to have it go to 5. But generally, you'll have 4 turns from the time that you call it. And each turn, this little counter is going to advance. Once it hits 4, you either need to have met your conditions, which means meet one of those breakout zones, get some German units in it, or you fail. All right, that's for the German player. The Soviet player's choices really don't change throughout the game. It's all in the German player's hands. The Soviet player simply has to stop the German player. The big thing for the Soviet player is they don't know which one they're going into, A, B, or C. So they have to try to block out all of them. And it's going to behoove the German player to, probably make feints and make it seem like they're going for B when they're really going for A, or C, then A, whichever they're trying to do. But they need to meet their objective by the time the token reaches this position. And as far as the special case goes, I won't get into a whole lot of specifics of it, but generally it can only happen under very specific circumstances, like I said, which means that the German player has to call it on turn 4 and then has to play a certain card, I think it's Air Fleet, by turn 7 or on turn 7, one of those two, for there to be that final turn. So it's like 2-3 conditions have to be specifically met for there to be that extra turn. So unless those conditions are met, the game's going to end on turn 7 or turn 4 of Donnerschlag. Like I said, the German player can call Donnerschlag whenever they want. Generally, it's not going to be a good idea for them to call it on turn 1, but they can call it whenever they like, and they have until that marker gets there. But they sometimes can squeak out that one extra turn that they might need as long as they've met certain conditions, being calling Donnerschlag on turn 4 and having that specific card they need to play right there at the time when Donnerschlag is going to hit number 4 on the track. So how is the game played? And this really what kind of drew me to this game, right, is it has a enemy action feel to it, but lighter. Like something you could read over in just a few minutes. The rule book isn't long. The actual rules themselves only go to page 10 in the rule book. And something you can get to the table quickly, start playing it, but it does play off decks of cards. And it just has that little bit of an enemy action feel in the way it's going to be played. Now, this is way, 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 way lighter. But I think any war gamer is going to sit down and understand this game just like right off the bat. And now what I mean by that is the fact that the rules themselves are intuitive to anyone who's played a war game. There's nothing here that you're not going to have experienced before in another war game. Whether it's tracing lines of supply, very basic. Can you trace back to a road hex? back somewhere on your side of the board. All right, so Soviets are going to trace over this way, Germans are tracing that way, and you just have to trace a clear line, at least, you know, any number of hexes back to your side that doesn't have enemy area zones of control or units in the way. Same thing when it comes to zone of control. It's going to be the 6 hexes around your units. And if you enter an enemy zone of control, you're going to have to stop. Same when it comes to retreating. The usual things are going to happen. You don't want to retreat into enemy zones of control, that type of stuff. Combat results table. It's going to be intuitive as you're looking at it. All the rules of this game are simple to understand and exactly what you would anticipate for a war game. If you've played a war game before, there's a very good chance you could sit down with this, simply learn how the card play works, and be good to go looking at the player aid, which, by the way, I haven't mentioned it enough yet. The quality of components here are outstanding. This is not card stock. This is actually mounted player aid, and all the player aids are mounted. You get a couple of these, and you get a couple that show you set up for the gameplay. I'll show you that here in just a sec. But for our player aid, we've got our nice sequence of play, our little combat results table here, and a nice reminder here, because there are certain units that will come into play during certain segments of the game if you roll depending high or low. If it's low, the Axis units attack, Soviet ad hoc infantry is added. If Soviet units attack, Axis alarm grouping get added. Now that comes with little units that you will put into opaque bowl, however you like. And they even have little snafu counters, they're called, that get added in. There's a couple that get added in with the Soviet troops, and one that gets added in here with the Axis troops. Now, these don't really get a whole lot of stuff they can do, like these guys aren't moving. You can see they've got 0 movement value, only 1 attack value. It's kind of just a group of infantry that got thrown together. But hey, they might do you some good. They can slow the enemy down. And looking at our combat results table here, easy to understand. A is attacker, D is defender, 1 or 2, how many steps they're going to be lost, and yet just a simple D6 roll with your modifiers, and you're looking at your combat differential to determine what column that you're going to be rolling on. And then you might have shifts like that combined arm bonus that I was mentioning earlier about the different colors on the units. Then we've got our terrain effects, shows how all of those are going to apply, and then things like your movement point cost. Also, simple stuff to understand for the game, zones of control, stacking's easy, a couple of units, and then basically an HQ can be in there. And German units can stack with the Romanian units. Things like the command range, which comes into basically the card play, which I am very grateful that they put this down here, because otherwise I would have been going to the rulebook a lot to look this up. But how you activate your units is based on the card play. The Soviet player is relatively easier because they're just activating groups of units by color, whether it's the stripe or the army. The Soviets seem to activate large groups of units and just kind of mill them about. The Axis activates specific units and kind of knife strikes their way in. And also on the back of this player aid, there is an extended sequence of play which goes into depth over some of the rules of the game itself as well, which is nice to have, because some of the stuff that isn't fully explained on the other side, they do go into here, so you aren't really going to have to dig into the rulebook a whole lot once you have gone over it. The other player aids I was talking about, these are the setup player aids, okay? So these are the ones that are going to tell you exactly where your units go. I freaking love this. Color-coded, or not color-coded, but the units there on the board, so you can look right to it, compare it, be able to throw them right on the board and hit your tripod at the same time. But it makes it so easy for setup, especially if it's the first time you played the game, because you can take the counter sheet itself and just punch the units as you're going out. Boom, boom, boom. Put them right on the board. You're good to go. I love this. It always makes it so much easier. also the reinforcements and when they get added to the game, because the Germans do get some reinforcements, as do the Soviets. And it tells you what turn they're coming in on, where they're coming in from, and then reinforcements are covered in the rule book on where they can go, but there's a few stipulations along with that. And then just to show you guys, there is the Soviet rulebook as well that touches on where all their units are going to go. Obviously, they've got a few more, and then their reinforcements, which actually start coming in, I think, on turn 2. Yeah, on turn 2, and then turn 3, and then turn 6, and then turn 7. So yeah, they get a lot of guys who keep getting dumped in because obviously the Soviets were driving in a lot of units to try to keep that pocket snared in so those German units couldn't escape to fight another day. Okay, so I know you're going, all right, Gimpy, you've covered the basics of the game, but you haven't really told us how the units do what they're going to do. All right, so that's where the activation cards come in. And like I was saying, on our little sequence and play here, we've got our action phase, and you're going to play one activation card, and that's going to activate your units. You'll check them for supply, do your movement, do combat, all that good stuff at that time. So when we're looking at our activation cards, as an example, this is one of the German activation cards, and you see here at the very top says activation. Easy to tell. There's combat cards as well, which we'll show here in just a sec, but this one says early. There are cards that say late. These are going to get added in later in the game. So you'll shuffle up the ones that say early to start your game. And this will show a top and a bottom, all right? Soviets are the same way. We'll show you one of those here in just a sec, but it'll give you a couple of choices on what you're going to do. Here, we could activate units of this formation or a panzer division. So when we're looking at this card, if we look at that counter, you see it's got that symbol, that small little symbol right there in between its attack and its movement matches, all right? So we could activate those guys, or we could pick a panzer division to activate instead. So it gives us a couple of different choices on which way we want to go with this. Now, the Germans have a different way to activate their units as well. They get what's called the, I'm going to mispronounce the crap out of it, the Schwerpunkt marker. I think I'm going with that right, hopefully. This is a marker that gets added with a combat card play, and then afterwards it can be added back in to any German unit, but it gets attached to a specific German unit during the admin phase. And once it's attached, it stays with that unit, and it can be used to activate units within range of this counter that are in command and all that good stuff. And they can activate and move along with this unit. So it's kind of like a, hey, we're going to focus here and go do some stuff. Now, if the unit that this is attached to, though, gets taken out, this gets removed, and it does get to come back into play in the next admin phase. Okay, so how the Soviets operate is way different than the Germans, all right? They still have their top and bottom, but they're mainly looking at the colors on what they're activating. They do have a couple of command units, but those don't get added until later. So generally speaking, you're not going to have to worry about command ranges like the German units are. The German units have to worry about their command units, where they are, keeping their people in ranges, the staying focused and cohesive. The Soviets kind of just got them out there willy-nilly, let's shoot Germans. All right, so you'll have situations like this where it's activate either one of the HQs, okay, the commands, and then those commands can activate, do their thing, activate units around them like a normal command unit, or you'll have stuff like this where it says at the bottom, red units of one army, or units of one color from one army, or all units of one formation. Sounds kind of wonky, but you'll get the hang of it. Let me show you an example. And I am glad they put this in the rulebook, because this would not have made sense to me had they not. All right, so like I grabbed out this card as an example. This one says yellow units of one army. Well, we see this is the red army. It's got the darker background. These are the yellow units of that army. They have the yellow stripe, okay? So all the yellow units with this red background could activate, okay? This one would allow us to activate all the red units of one army. So all the red units that had the darker background, or all the red units that had the lighter background to it. And the lighter background is this one that I'm talking about here. This one is the other example. Units of one color from one army, or all units of one formation. All right, so you got units of one color from one army. That's what it's showing you on this side. One color from one army. This side is showing you units of one formation. And you can tell by the symbol there at the bottom, and then they're up at the top right. Okay, so just make sure that you're looking at that specifically. Feel free to reference this example in the rule book to kind of keep your mind right when you're figuring out which color is which color when you're activating these units. And just to show you down here below, it does go into it, and it shows here a different type of activation card that does show the HQ or one formation, and the Soviet HQ looks as such. So just like activation cards, you're going to have combat cards, and there's combat cards for each side, just the same. So you've got German activation cards, Soviet activation cards, Soviet combat cards, and German combat cards. Same principle in that there's going to be a top and a bottom. You'll have a general and then a tactical. So something that's kind of out there and something more specific to maybe a combat scenario. If you do see a die symbol though here, that means that to complete whatever this is, you have to perform a die roll, and it has to be successful for the event to actually take place. So this is a general event, and it can be any time for the rest of the game. Starting with round 4, one more combat card can be drawn. So let's say this is ex-Soviet card. Soviets played this. It would be removed after a successful play, and if you don't successfully play it, then you're going to discard it. So you'd roll a die, and you would look for a 3 or less. If you got successful, this card's gone, and then you would get an extra combat card. If not, it gets discarded, shuffled back in. Hopefully you draw it again and maybe be successful. Or you could use it for its tactical event. Also tells you when and where. This is any time, any situation. Roll any roll of your own again. So it gives you a re-roll, but it's your re-roll. You can't force your opponent to do a re-roll, and that's simple discard. Like I was saying, though, the Soviets do have some different types of cards in their hands, and the fact that to get their HQ on the board, both of them, the 51st HQ here, can get on board the game on the map, hex 3121, and you have to meet this roll. So if you fail this, then boom, you have to discard it and try again next time. Obviously, if you succeed, you're not going to have to worry about it. You'll just remove this card at that point. And just like there are early and late versions of the activation cards, there are early and late versions of the combat cards as well. So that can change up the game very nicely. So that's the basics of the game. You've got your small pocket of German forces over here. They're bunched up. They're trying to make their breakout. And while there's not a whole lot of Soviet forces blocking them off here, they're just running into them piecemeal. There's Soviet forces here, a bunch more back over here, and there's going to be more pouring in as the game goes on, and they're all going to be swarming in. And obviously they're doing things like blocking off the bridge crossings here. These aren't defended, but still it would take a while to break through and get over there. So the Germans have a daunting task in front of them to push through as quickly as they can. No time to dawdle. They can't hold back. They've got to slam through as hard as they can up the map. And then when they think they're ready, call it, and then pick which one they're actually going to go for. All the while, the Soviets are going to be trying to get in their way, have units behind them, have units flanking them. It's one hell of a task for the Germans to make their way out. So yeah, in a way, this really does remind me of a more approachable enemy action type game, in the fact that it's got the card play being used to activate your different units. There is a fair amount less choice in the fact that you're randomly drawing the cards. So you're not getting as much choice when it comes to organizing the cards in your hand to pick exactly which units and how you're activating them. Same basic principle though, in the fact that you are trying to get the combat odds in your favor through the use of your activations to best utilize the troops that you have to achieve your objective. All right, but since this one has ran a little longer than I would have liked, I gave you a basic overview of how the game works, but I want to show you some of the activation of the cards and see how the units go back and forth, and especially see how the combat works in the game, because it's not overly difficult. Like I said, this plays so simply. If you've played a war game before, you know how this game's going to play. The same basic concepts are there with tracing your lines of supply, your zones of control, movement, combat factors, all that stuff's there. It's almost intuitive in how the rules are laid out. So I'll do a quick part 2 where I just draw some cards, go through a round, and let you guys see how each side's going to activate and attack each other in trying to achieve their objectives. If you guys have any questions or something you'd like to see, feel free to put it down below and I'll try to address it in part 2. You guys take care. I'll catch you in the next one.